Fallout New Vegas is a game that's filled to the brim with content, with almost as much cut content as there is content in the base game. Today I'll be delving into some of the more odd parts of this game. This will probably be uploaded in tentatively 2 to 4 parts, assuming it's something you guys want to see, and since I'm using this image that I found on Reddit, and it's fairly girthy, I want to give each entry time to elaborate on what it is and give my thoughts on them. Do note that some of these entries are pretty vague, so this is just my interpretation based on my own research and my own knowledge of the game. So if I get some things wrong, don't crucify me. Get it? I'll be using footage from my most recent playthrough of New Vegas as B-roll in the downtime that I'm not using images to explain the entries. So without further ado, grab a snack and a beverage and get cozy while we take a look at the first 2 layers of the Fallout New Vegas Iceberg. Vault 19. Vault 19 is one of the many vaults that you can find in the game. During the events of New Vegas, you stumble upon it being occupied by some powder gangers led by Samuel Cook. The interesting part of this entry isn't explicitly what we see in-game, it's about what happened to its previous occupants. Cook states that he found it completely abandoned, so unlike Vault 3 where the Fiends took it over, the powder gangers just sort of walked in. Much like the rest of the vaults, this one was an experiment by Vault-Tec, the objective being to induce paranoia through non-violent, non-chemical means. You can read some terminal entries about how they split the vault dwellers up into 2 factions, and there were many things that were just off about the vault. Things such as lights that blinked in some sort of code, unusual drafts from the vents, and strange, high-pitched noises. It's a pretty safe bet to assume that the experiment was a success, and they eventually turned on each other and are all dead or fled the area. However, you don't find any bodies here, so that's still one loose end that we don't have an explanation for. The vault's located in the middle of a very inhospitable area surrounded by Deathclaws and Kesdors, some of the toughest things in the game, so it stands to reason that maybe they all just left and got picked off by the creatures surrounding the vault. Mr. New Vegas is an AI. Mr. New Vegas is the host and DJ of Radio New Vegas. Throughout the game, he plays certified bangers and indirectly comments about your adventures through the Mojave. Based on the real-world star Wayne Newton, also known as Mr. Las Vegas, he's been doing his job since before the Great War. And you may be thinking, wow, that's a really long time. And you'd be right. 200 years, in fact. That's because he's an AI developed by Mr. House before the Great War. This is stated in a behind-the-scenes interview with one of Obsidian's producers, Jason Bergman. And I quote, "He's literally just a voice on the radio, no body," end quote. This is a neat bit of Fallout lore that I didn't know initially, but it just kind of fleshes out the world of New Vegas a little more knowing it. The Lonesome Drifter is the mysterious stranger's child. The mysterious stranger is a recurring NPC that comes to the aid of the protagonist of the Fallout games. He's often depicted as a middle-aged man sporting a long coat and a .44 Magnum that plays a guitar riff upon holstering or unholstering his weapon. The Lonesome Drifter is an NPC that you can find north of the El Dorado gas station, and like any other rational human, you can wander up to him and ask him about his life story. He goes on to explain that his mom worked herself to death in order to provide for them after his father left them. He describes his father as a real, mysterious feller. After that, he picked up the only things that were left from his father, a guitar and the mysterious Magnum, and wandered the wasteland searching for him, not knowing what he would do if he even found him. It's heavily implied but not outright stated that the mysterious stranger is his father. In fact, the Magnum that you get from him is also a .44 Magnum that plays the same tune as the stranger's. I personally think that's enough evidence to imply the relationship between the two, but only Bethesda knows for sure. Baja Ghosts. Baja Ghosts is referring to a line of dialogue by Chief Hanlon that goes, "President Kimball ordered our most experienced rangers to chase ghosts down in Baja." It's a region only mentioned in New Vegas that's settled by the NCR, and it has a complicated history of the settlers shooting outsiders. Eventually, the town was evacuated, and by the time of the events of New Vegas, President Kimball ordered veteran rangers into Baja, which is considered to be overkill and kind of a waste of time, money, and resources, hence being referred to as chasing ghosts. Josh Sawyer, one of the lead writers and producers for New Vegas, has stated that the identity of the ghosts is an intentional mystery. Some speculate that it could be a rival faction, such as the Brotherhood of Steel, or that the ghosts aren't referring to anyone, simply referring to problems that don't exist, and the president is just wasting resources. Zetan UFO. The Zetans are a recurring alien race in the Fallout games, most prominently featured in the Fallout 3 DLC Mothership Zeta. However, if the player has the Wild Wasteland trait, they can be found exactly once in New Vegas, north of the Horowitz farmstead. There's a camp with a crashed spacecraft, surrounded by 2 aliens and an alien captain who has a unique weapon, the Alien Blaster. These are always hostile towards the player and can't be interacted with. It's unfortunate because having these scattered throughout the base game with a side quest or a random encounter or something would have been a neat addition and would add to the overall world building of Fallout. However, my opinion may be biased because I just think cryptids are neat. Deathclaw Promonotry. The Deathclaw Promonotry is a neat little unmarked location that's home to many variations of Deathclaws. The only way to access it is a dirt path near the Prospector camp, and it's the only location in the game where you can get the Remnant's power armor outside of the companion quest for Arcade Gannon. It's a neat area that most players will probably overlook, containing one of the more rare items in the game. It's strange that something like this exists and it got as much attention in terms of game development as it did, because it's something so far out of the way with no real relevance to the story or involvement in any quests. Randall Clark. Randall Clark is a character mentioned in the DLC Honest Hearts. There's an absolute dump truck of lore concerning this guy, and if you want the full picture, you should really go look up some videos on it. After this video, of course. They're very interesting and very worth your time. However, I'll summarize some of it here. Randall was a former US Army soldier who, after his family died in the nuclear blasts, he moved to Zion National Park. When there, he became a survivalist living off the land and eventually watching over and protecting the inhabitants of Zion from a distance. This became the foundation of their religion. He was a godlike figure protecting them from out of sight and leaving them notes on how to survive as well as moral guidelines. He eventually became terminally ill, climbed to one of the peaks of Zion, and closed his eyes for the last time, his final words being, "Goodbye, Zion." This is absolutely some fantastic, bittersweet environmental storytelling, and one of the main highlights of the DLC, and perhaps even the game for me. You should definitely check this one out. Big Mountain created Night Stalkers and Cazadors. Big Mountain's a pre-war research facility that you visit in the DLC Old World Blues. Headed by the think tank scientists, they conducted many experiments of questionable ethical standing. One of these experiments was the creation of two of the Wasteland's most fearsome creatures, the Night Stalkers and the Cazadors, created by Dr. Boros in an attempt to preserve the DNA of the creatures that he spliced together. He believed they were sterile and docile, neither of which turned out to be true. They eventually escape Big Mountain and relocate to the Mojave, where they become one of the many terrifying creatures that roam the wastes. Hegelian Dialectics. Hegel was a German philosopher that's indirectly mentioned in New Vegas. His writings are kind of the cornerstone of the ideology of Caesar. He describes his school of thought as thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, where essentially opposite ideologies are bound to clash. This is clearly alluding to the Legion and NCR's eventual battle over Hoover Dam, and is kind of the wider narrative of the game as a whole. However, take this with a grain of salt since it's coming from a man with a brain tumor who read a few philosophy books. The Lake Mead Monster. This one's kinda dumb. This is just the crashed B-29 bomber that you raise out of the lake in the Boomer's questline. Once you do that, Mr. New Vegas will report about locals having seen a large object or creature surfacing on Lake Mead, dubbed the Lake Mead Monster. Some people online have tried to make a gaming urban legend out of this, which is kind of silly. However, I found this image that someone made and it makes me giggle, so I'm including it here. The Dust mod is the true ending. The Dust mod is a very popular game overhaul mod for New Vegas that emphasizes the lore and survival parts of the game. It's set 20 years after the events of New Vegas, and you play as some random survivor. During that time, the cloud from the Sierra Madre makes its way to the Mojave, the tunnelers from the Divide move in, and most of the major factions are either wiped out or nearly unrecognizable. It's a really cool idea for a mod. Obviously, since it's a mod, it's not the canon ending, but it's a really neat what-if type of scenario. Gravesite Whispers. This one's a really cool detail that I never noticed when playing. If you go to any of the lootable graves at night and listen closely, you'll hear ambient disembodied whispering coming from the grave area. This is most likely meant to be the whispers of the dead in the grave, and I just think it's so cool that they added a little detail like that. It really adds a slightly spooky aspect to the world of Fallout. Underpass Settlement. The Underpass Settlement is a bit of cut content from New Vegas. While the actual structure remains in the base game, it's just north of New Vegas. It was originally intended to have more. Several NPCs, as well as a tie-in to the quest Beyond the Beat, and a water purifier would have been here. Now there's just aggressive Brahmin. As we proceed, it may be a good time to mention that there's a lot of cut content that was cut out of the game due to technical limitations or time constraints, some of which make an appearance in this iceberg. Thanks to the devotion of the community, there's many mods that exist to add most of it back in. Todd paid off Metacritic. Back before the release of New Vegas, Bethesda offered Obsidian a bonus in addition to their flat rate, if the game got an 85 or above on Metacritic. Unfortunately, they missed the mark by literally 1 point. While the devs were disappointed by this, they accepted it because it was the terms that they agreed on. There's no evidence of Todd paying anyone off, but look at that face. He knows what he did. Jokes aside, there's no evidence of wrongdoing towards Obsidian on the behalf of Bethesda, and they were just happy to be offered a bonus at all. It's just unfortunate game review companies don't actually know anything about video games. H&H Tools Quest. I couldn't find a ton about this one, but my best guess is that it has something to do with the Lucky 38 executive override option on the terminal in Anthony House's office at the H&H Tools factory. This is a remnant of more cut content from the quest The Moon Comes Over the Tower, where you would have to bug that terminal along with a few others for the followers of the apocalypse. Caesar's Legion cut content. I'm not sure if this one's talking about a specific bit of cut content or the cut content as a whole. Partially due to consoles not being able to handle the sheer volume of content that was planned for the game, a lot of content had to be cut out, and a good portion of this was Caesar's Legion content. They were meant to have a much larger role in the game, but in the vanilla version they're lacking outside of the main quest line and a handful of side quests. Chinese stealth suits. The Chinese stealth suits are a suit of armor that was in the Fallout 3 DLC Operation Anchorage. However, there's 2 suits that can be found tucked away in a really obscure spot in New Vegas. In the office level of Hoover Dam, they're located in a wooden crate in a storage room. Unfortunately, due to being an older model, these don't have the stealth systems as the ones deployed in Anchorage. They may not be great sets of armor, but I cannot lie, the drip is immaculate, and if you like to get all the unique items in the game, you have to make sure to grab these. So that was the first 2 layers. Mostly common knowledge stuff that most of the people who played New Vegas will probably know about. I did, however, learn a few things though, and I hope that you guys found it interesting. If you watched until now, I just wanted to say thank you, that means a lot to me. If you want to support me by leaving a like and subscribing, that would help the channel grow, and I'd personally appreciate it a ton. Did you have a favorite entry? What'd you think of this format in general? Let me know in the comments. If all goes well, I'll do the rest of the iceberg eventually, but this script's getting pretty long as is, and there's still many entries, so I'm going to cut it off here. As always, thank you for watching, have a good one, and I'll see you next time.